Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video. In this video I'm going to be going through all the brand new slot 4 specials for 5-star weapons, and it is going to be the tier 4 upgrades. These are going to be the specific upgrades for each trait, so they're going to be very particular, sort of like stun on defense, sort of like impair on defense is for slot 3. This is going to be very particular for slot 4. This is going to help you determine what you want to research, as this does cost armory tokens, so you can focus on something in particular if there is something that stands out for you and your roster. However, before I show you the new slot 4s for 5-star weapons, I want to show you a mechanic that was introduced, which is the fixed weapon switching. You can see it in your research right now, and you're probably wondering why it does. I have seen some questions be raised. I've got a 5-star weapon here on Alice in beta region. If I click on the weapon, as you can see it is 5-star. Normally you would not be able to swap this out, but because it is a 5-star weapon, you can swap it for any other 5-star weapon that is the same trait, so that is alert. And basically what this means is, with the attached weapon you can utilize the actual special that you get normally. For instance, you can keep impair when attacking on Alice. You can do a huge bonus to AP when attacking and 40% HP, but then you can decide, hey, I want to use her in this particular team, maybe on a defense team, and I want to give her a stun gun just for this team. So you can just equip the stun gun, and this one's got focus stun, and she would have a stun gun then, and it would only be for that team. Every other team she'd be in, she'd have her normal weapon unless you replaced it again with another weapon. Depends on sort of, you can see her stats changing based on the buffs on the weapon, or if you didn't want to, you could just remove it and use her default weapon just to have impair on attack and what you'd already upgraded it to. I think this is a fantastic addition because it also allows us to use our S-class characters much quicker. Let's say, for instance, Pete, you could be upgrading his weapon for a very long time trying to get stun. However, instead of upgrading his weapon, you could be upgrading a secondary weapon, and once you finally get it, you can just put it in his hands, and you could already have a huge bonus to AP on attack on him. You could also already have a bit of a boost to his HP, so he's already reasonable, but you're just waiting for that stun gun on a secondary weapon that you can equip to him. The thing to mention is the weapon that is in the character's hands that is attached has to be 5-star. As you can see, this is a 5-star weapon, and the weapon you're replacing with also has to be a 5-star weapon. So that's the only downside, but that's a new mechanic. Okay, back to the slot 4 specials, and we'll start with alert. Now, with slot 4, there are basically 4 different types, just like there are in slot 3, where it's defender, slayer, supporter and raider. In this, it is going to be amplification and destruction. These 2 are generally offensive, and then the next 2 are resistance and team player, and these 2 are generally defensive. We are only going to be looking at the tier 4s, so we'll start off with amplification tier 4 for alert weapons. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, otherwise it's going to take a very long time. Generally speaking, these are not going to be as powerful as the slot 3s, but you cannot disarm these. But it does do some nice things that are going to work with particular teams and particular characters. So I'm only going to be reading out this blue buff, and the blue one is the trait crit, the very rare one, sort of like stun on defense, stun on attack, that sort of thing. This one says, when attacking, spread 1 negative debuff to an adjacent enemy for 1 turn. This does not include infection, otherwise it would be very, very powerful. But for instance, if someone's got bleed on them and it's like 3,000, you could spread that to an adjacent character, from what I understand. If someone's got stun on them, you could spread stun to an adjacent character. So theoretically, if you had 4 characters with this on and 1 enemy was stunned, you could potentially spread that stun to everybody on that defense team, and that would be extremely powerful. Next up, we have destruction as a tier 4, and this one is when dealing a critical hit, cause a 33% slow for 3 turns to that enemy. Here is one of the few controlling tier 4s here, and that is pretty strong. You could run that on, let's say, a Krista, and Krista is basically going to be a slow specialist. She's going to have her weapon that deals slow and also her rush. I think this one's very powerful. I can see it being quite a big favorite for a lot of people on attack teams. Now we go on to the more defensive ones, and this one's a better chance to remove 1 negative effect from this character at the start of every turn. So potentially someone could be stunned on defense, and it could just be cleansed. Now it's unclear whether they'd actually just get a fresh turn at that point, but that is very strong. And for the team player tier 4 special, it says at the start of each turn, all other teammates get 10% defense for 1 turn for each alert teammate on the team. So if you had a full alert team, you'd have 10% defense for everybody except the character with this weapon. Now again, it's unclear if you had 2 characters with this, whether everybody would get 20% except the 2 characters with that weapon who would obviously only have 10% each because they were getting the buff from each other, but whether they stack or not. It's unclear if it stacks, but this could be a nice little potential increase to defense teams to make them even harder to take down. And this is where certain weapons that reduce defense that we saw on slot 3s are going to become even more powerful. So now we move on to fast weapons, and we're going to go for the amplification again, and it says attacks extend the duration of existing damage over time effects by 1 turn. And this is amazing for bleed teams. It is only for fast characters, but you could potentially just have a fast character outside of your attack team that generally speaking wouldn't be there otherwise. Having this on top, it's kind of like Lacerator to a certain extent. As much as it doesn't double the damage that turn, it does extend it by 1 turn, so effectively doubling the damage over the course of the entire fight. If you could imagine you had this on someone like Fast Shiva, she'd be lacerating and extending the duration of the bleed in the same attack, which would be amazing. Now I move on to Destruction. Tier 4 for fast characters, and I like this one a lot as well. Turns characters' base crit chance to 100% crit rate. This isn't 100 crit, this is 100%, which means they will always crit every single attack. And there's multiple things that are great with this. One, it is obviously you're going to be critting every attack, so characters that need it for their specialist skills are going to be hitting Guardian Shields, they're going to be hitting Confounding, that sort of thing. Within the 6-star area, we've got like Yumiko's and the Ezekiel's. For someone like Heng Yen, he's going to be hitting these crits with his basic attacks and getting crosshairs, but he's also going to be hitting crits on his rush where they can do 2 separate attacks, so a lot of damage output. Now the big boost here is obviously he's not going to then need crit on his weapon, he's not going to need crit on his mods, the same with any other fast character that has this, and that frees up extra slots for other stats, more resistances. So overall this is a very, very strong upgrade, and me personally, I'm definitely going to be going for this on Heng Yen, Arav, and pretty much any other damage dealing fast character in the future. For resistance within fast characters, it says when attacked while impaired, dazed, or slowed, reflect 250% of the damage. Now this is a lot of reflect, and if you think about it, characters like Priya cannot stop herself from dazing a character. Let's say if it's a shield, she would have to defend. So after that, that character would do huge amounts of reflect damage, and that is brutal, even for basic attacks. So you've definitely got to pay attention to a character that's got this and be very careful with your debuffs. Lastly, within fast weapons, it's the team player, and it is up to 2 teammates regain 10% HP per turn for each fast teammate on the team. So you could potentially have 5 fast teammates in a team, and the heals would just be popping off. If everyone had absolute defense as well, it'd be very, very frustrating to get through this. And this obviously can't be disarmed, so you're going to have to either do heal reduction. I'm not sure if it works if a character is stunned, if it stops it like the tier 3s used to on slot 3, but that would be a lot of healing if there were multiple characters with this. Next up, we're going to go with tough weapons, and we're going to look at amplification first. I will say that this is probably one of the best looking weapons I've seen for a long time. That was in beta. I was very happy to see this. It says basic attack critical hits will hit 2 additional enemies for 150% of the damage of a basic attack. So I don't know if that can crit or not. I would assume not. It'll kind of be like collateral. So this is basically like a 2 character collateral hit, but you can get it on the weapon upgrade. So if a character has this and collateral damage, that damage will stack because it works the same way as splash damage. So it's kind of like splash damage, but you can control it a lot better. It's not like a better chance to do it, it's reliant on your critical attacks. Although that is in itself RNG, because you can't get 100% crit as a tough character, but you could as a fast character. Now those characters may gain AP because with collateral they do not, but with this they may well gain AP. I guess it's going to be down to the first person who gets this to test it out. Moving on to Destruction Tier 4, it says basic attack critical hits are turned into main damage. Whether it's the entire attack is main damage or just the part that is the critical damage, it's hard to know. But that's going to be very frustrating, especially if you can manage to daze Pete, because he can obviously cleanse this. So then if any heals do go off, they're going to have a new max HP block in terms of how much they can be healed. So if someone's taken main damage to take them down to 50% HP, and then they take 20% damage from other sources, if they got healed for 100%, they could only get healed up to that 50% HP. And if you've run into teams with Kapoor on it, one of his biggest things is that active with that huge heal. Moving on to resistance for tough characters now, and it's dazed when taking critical hit damage, daze the enemy for 2 turns. Now this is really nice, again, using this on the shield or a good defensive blue character. It's a controlling factor, and you've basically got to decide if you're going to attack them with a character that has high crit. Now, the downside of when you attack is every character has base crit, so you can get dazed just RNG, unfortunately. You can't disarm this, and actives can be very, very important for certain attack teams, especially if you're relying on control. So you've got to be very careful in what you do with this character. Again, stun may stop this, but we do not know. Lastly, within tough, it's team player, and it says up to 2 teammates get 5% bonus HP per turn for each tough teammate on the team. This of course is bonus HP, so it would work on turn 1, I assume, and this works exactly the same way as the alert and the fast one, in terms of the more tough characters you have, the more bonus HP that's going to be healed around. Bonus HP is a little bit nicer. It can be bypassed by bleed, of course, but this means it could go to characters with max HP. It's unclear if it would go to someone who was the lowest HP or not. I don't think this is too spectacular, but it's kind of continuing with the theme of fast and alert with the little small bonuses that they're getting from this special. And lastly, we'll move on to the strong weapons. We'll go with the Amplification tier 4 again. When attacking, 80% attack against enemies who are stunned, and this is very, very strong. Obviously for strong characters, that's no pun intended, but strong characters can do stun on attack. So if you have a very heavy strong attack team, this can be utilized very well. I can see this on a James, for instance, with that rush. That would be huge. Whether the collaterals would take notice of that base damage that you're attacking that initial character with, or if it's based off of the actual stat on his dossier, is hard to know. But that initial hit damage, that actual hit damage, is what James is going to be good for long term. It's going to be huge. An extra 80% damage is massive. If anyone remembers back to the 5-star era, we had Heath, who was a command, and when you got that 80% damage, you knew. And this should stack with any buffs that he has on him at the time. I have Alice, for instance, so it'd be 75% from Alice, 80% from this. Huge. Next up we have Destruction, and it says attacks steal 2 positive effects from the enemy you attack. Now this is strange because I don't see this being too destructive, but I like it to a certain extent. There are going to be some defense teams that rely on buffs, you know, getting those buffs around. This would steal elusive, for instance. That would be kind of useful. And it just says it steals to a positive effect, so it does seem like it's 100% chance. There's no percentage chance of this happening. So very powerful in the right character's hands. I would probably put this in a support character's hands, and it'll be less about stealing buffs to benefit from them. It'll just be more about stealing buffs so the defensive character doesn't have those buffs anymore. However, you could potentially use this on a defense team and see this as a way of buffing your defense team as you go. And there are of course just even the basic buffs that are quite worth stealing. For instance, Kapoor's rush isn't spectacular, but that 80% defense is, and if you were to remove that from, let's say, a Pete, he's going to take a lot more damage because of that. So you can see this being used in the various amounts of ways. So I kind of like this one. I don't think this one's too bad. It is just kind of odd that it is in Destruction, that's all. Next up we have Resistance, and it says this character's defense cannot be reduced, which is pretty huge. On a character like Lao Po, for instance, you cannot do defense down. She can get really, really tanky. Bleeds and burns are going to be so important against characters that get this special, and it's a big counter to those defense down characters. But like I said, bleed and burn will still be very useful. And lastly, for the team player slot, it says at the start of each turn, all other teammates get 10% attack for 1 turn for each strong teammate on the team. Very much like the alert one, but instead of a defense, it's attack. This will stack. It will stack with current buffs. So that means everyone would get 40% attack if everybody had this on an attack team, which is quite a big bonus turn 1. So those are all the upgrades. You can now see what you can go for within Amplification, Destruction, resistance and team player, so you can know where you want to aim in terms of you want to go for a particular one. Within fast, for instance, that 100% crit looks mighty tasty to me. Or maybe you see one within strong, for instance, that 80% extra damage against stunned characters. There are also, like you saw, some bonus stats that you can potentially get instead of getting that rare crit, which I just did read out. And I'd say potentially some of those are worth going for as well. There were one or two that did catch my eye. Do tell me if there's any potential builds that you're already thinking of for particular characters. I'm already going to be getting that 100% crit. I just know for my fast characters, I just can't wait. And I'm going to be trying to go for that 80% attack versus stun characters with James, definitely. I have to think on it a bit more for my other characters. Priya, I think, has quite a lot of options, so I'm going to relax a little bit on her weapon. But hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. Do tell me which weapons you're going to be upgrading first to 5-star. Just as a reminder, do make sure you have fully upgraded your weapon 3 times as a 4-star weapon before upgrading to 5-star, because once you upgrade to 5-star, it is permanent and that weapon is locked at whatever you have upgraded it to. Now you do get 3 extra upgrade opportunities, but you may as well take full advantage of the 3 you get as a 4-star, and this is the best time to go for a trait special in slot 3. But as I said, that is the end of my video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.